Hello everyone, this is update for December 30, 2022, day 310 of the war and of the date update. So just a quick catch up. So I had a little bit my sort of time off. Now I'm back. As a summary, during this time, front-wise, things didn't really change pretty much at all. So from that perspective, you haven't missed much. I want to talk a little bit about Ukrainian losses during the war. So today, Ukrainian governmental officials, they came out and said that Ukraine lost 15,000 missed in action and then 3.4 thousand prisoners of war. So this gives us all of this. Unfortunately, most of I would say 95%, 98% of this 15 out of this 15,000 missed in action is essentially dead. And then before that, some time ago, probably like 3-4 months ago, Ukrainian head of general staff said that Ukrainian losses were about 9,000. So that gives you, and this is obviously not correct time-wise, but at least it gives you the lowest numbers, about 24,000 dead on Ukrainian side, but the actual number is higher than that. Said before, it's probably now between 45 and 50,000 dead Ukrainian side, on the Ukrainian side. In terms of prisoners of war, the number is also much higher. This is 3.4 thousand is absolutely incorrect number, and it's closer to what Russian side is reporting, which is 10,000 prisoners of war. Russian law, just to kind of be sort of balanced, Russian losses are more or less the same as well. Russian side includes also this collaborators, I would say, at this point from Donetsk and Lugansk region. So also somewhere between 45-50,000 dead. But as I mentioned many times before, Ukraine cannot exchange one for one. Even it sounds very wrong to even say exchange one for one, but in this war, it's war of attrition, and Ukraine obviously cannot win strategically by losing this number, by fighting with quantity, not with quality, as I said many times before. So just want to reiterate the same point, because eventually it will lead to difficult situation on Ukrainian side sooner or later. Now let's switch a little bit to Russia. So Russian President Putin invited Chinese President Xi Jinping for the second time to visit Russia. The previous invitation was sometime in June of 2022, and Chinese president refused at that time. So things are getting a little bit more sort of tense with the US with every passing sort of day. So there is high probability that Chinese president will accept this invitation this time around. The invitation is for sometime spring of 2023. So also gives us, idea about the timeline for potential invasion of Taiwan if that happens. Mentioned before, it's not going to happen before probably April, and this probably remains sort of true sometime not earlier than let's say April, May of 2023. In other news in Russia, there's a report that pharma industry reduced production of all various kind of medication by about 14.5% year on year in November. There's a shortage of precursors that are usually being imported from the West, or I don't know, I guess from India, but doesn't look like India is having problem exporting to Russia. So and there's some problems developing there. So at this point, unclear what's the root cause of it. But there's also anecdotal sort of stories in Russia about the shortages of antibiotics. So there's clearly some problem in Russian pharma industry, but the exact root cause of that problem is unclear at this point. Now let's switch to China. China has new Minister of Foreign Affairs. This person is totally 100% Chinese president protege, and it has a pretty bad, I would say, tense relationship with the U.S. Sort of counterparty or minister, so U.S. equivalent of Minister of Foreign Affairs, which is Department of State. So basically, this is kind of like a hardliner that is being put by the Chinese president to basically, to execute on Chinese president sort of will and desires and so on. So, which is not surprise given that Chinese president sort of won and is essentially purging right now and replacing all of the key figures in the Chinese government or state structure that will be sort of supporting of his policies, essentially. And that might be another reason why this invasion is being sort of put off for some time, because it takes time just bureaucratically to put key people in key positions everywhere. Because if you go to war, you really need to be prepared. You need you need to have you need your own people essentially everywhere, and he obviously has some sort of clout because that's why he won in the first place. But for sure, there are sort of pockets of resistance, and before invasion is going to happen, he needs to eliminate those pockets of resistance. So this move is one of those, in that direction, essentially. Then Taiwan is actively preparing for the for invasion. They're building 10.5 thousand bomb shelters for 86 million people, which is pretty intelligent because Taiwan does not have 86,000 people, about like third of that, or I don't know, like 30 million plus minus ballparking. And the reason for that is essentially they expect some of them are going to get destroyed, so you still have sort of shelters, and so you have sort of extra capacity, which is, again, as I said, this is how you really prepare for the war. This is really correct movement there. At the same time, there is a clear division growing within Taiwanese society, because the Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, accused, I think it's called Democratic Progressive Party, which is essentially kind of like an extension of the U.S. Democratic Party, that they are basically selling out TSMC, which stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, to the U.S. or to the West, because recently there were several announcements of TSMC that they're gonna build plants, I think, in Japan, U.S., and then actually I think in Germany. So obviously nobody's happy in Taiwan because it's core to Taiwanese competitiveness, and losing the crown jewel, nobody's going to be happy about it. It makes sense. In terms of what's going on in the Chinese economy, it's definitely not doing well. So South Korean export to China went down by 25% for the 20 days of December, year on year. And in general, South Korean export went down 8.8% year on year. So as you can see that even, just general situation in the world economy is, getting worse, but Chinese economy is clearly in this sort of what I call implosion phase, which may force Chinese presence sort of hand in terms of invading Taiwan. As I said before, technically speaking, China has essentially control of Taiwan, or just need to wait 2 years to gain full control of Taiwan, and essentially, let's say, annex Taiwan in very peaceful way. So that's sort of ideal strategy for China. That may not happen given the whole imploding Chinese economy, and where it's sort of that may force decision of the Chinese president. Part of that, you probably heard, you're probably aware that there's relaxation of all of this COVID restrictions in China, which, as I said before, the reason for that is imploding economy, and these restrictions makes things worse to the point that it's becoming sort of extremely combustive inside of China, in terms of sort of disobedience and so on. And so apparently Chinese leadership realizes that they cannot tighten screws more, that it can just blow up. So they decided to sort of kind of open release valves in society, and sort of help sort of address this problem that way. Well, remains to be seen if this works out, or they will need sort of additional release valve, which may transfer into the invasion of Taiwan. Now let's move to Ukraine. So on the 29th, there was another major round of Russian missile attack against Ukrainian energy infrastructure, or specifically more focused on distribution power grid as opposed to the power generation. So one important note about this attack is that for the first time, Ukrainian anti-air defenses worked in pretty good way. Even though there were hits, obviously there were hits, but given the magnitude of the attack, I think it was about 120 rockets. Some of them were sort of fake ones, or dummy ones, probably a better way to say it. Nevertheless, this is a large-scale attack, sort of like large wave, or actually it was waves of attack, and they did not achieve the same level of negative effect than the previous ones of a similar magnitude. So that's why I said that Ukrainian anti-air defenses worked definitely much better this time around. This may or may not, but I would say as a working hypothesis at this point, that this may mark that change in this in this war, in this rocket war, missile war, where it's going to be progressively more expensive for the Russian side to inflict any damage on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And in general, the best way to see the whole situation is, Russian side is destroying this power distribution network. Ukraine is sort of fixing it, and the question is, what's being sort of speed, right? At what speed Russia is able to destroy Ukrainian distribution network versus at what speed it's being repaired. And so far it was that Russia was destroying at faster speed that it's being repaired. Now it looks like the speed is going down tremendously, and Ukraine is getting more transformers from all over the world, from the West, obviously, mostly, and but also from, for example, noticeably Azerbaijan, um, which is sorry, just getting cough. So that allows to sort of keep the system sort of somewhat working. It's keep it from disintegrating into islands so far. The only question is at this point, how many more attacks can Russia do, and the magnitude of the attacks, and sort of success of Ukrainian side in defending against those. So far, as I said, this is a summary. The situation seems to be changing in Ukrainian favor. It doesn't mean that things are great, improving, and everything's perfect. Definitely far from that. The power grid is in terrible shape, literally in coma, as I said before. But it can exist in this coma for a long time, and if the success rate for the Russian attacks goes tremendously down, the amount of the new equipment or transformers that Ukraine gets will eventually make it possible to slowly but surely improve the situation. So again, remains to be seen if this is something, changing the trend. Now let's actually move to the battlefield situation. I'm gonna do walkthrough in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. So there's ongoing exchange of the fire along the sort of state border, where there's no active sort of I'd say attacks, but the intensity is kind of like in the middle. Basically, it's not low intensity, but it's not extremely high intensity. Oh, and then one more thing I forgot to mention about Belarus. So there was some Belarus government official who came out and said that they reached sort of operation level of operational kind of like coordination with Russia, between the armies, Russian army, Belarus army, which really translate in a simple way. It means that at this point, Belarus army is extension of the Russian army. That Russia really controls Belarus army. This was, I mentioned this before, but now it's officially sort of mentioned by the official Belarus government official, essentially. So, at the same time, as I mentioned many times before, the capabilities of the Belarus army is essentially not meaningful. It's between 10 to 15,000 troops that can be used, and that's absolutely not enough to do anything against Ukraine. And there are also reports that there are now like slightly more than 20,000 of the Russian troops, giving this whole 30 to 35,000 troops. It's still totally not enough to, let's say, if Russia wants to attack Kyiv again, this is obviously going to be failed attempt. As I mentioned before, the number of troops that are needed is about 500,000. And that's, as you can imagine, 35,000 is far away from 500,000, not even close. This probably at this point more of a sort of irritation of the Ukrainian sort of president leadership to kind of keep them kind of stressed, basically. But essentially, there is no meaningful threat from Belarus at this point. Now let's jump to the North Lugansk front line. Things here, as you can see, haven't changed much. Same locations of Russian attacks here. Kind of this Nevsky, Terny area. Also, Russian side is reporting that Ukrainian, the only thing, I would say small change is that Ukrainian troops are managing to kind of infiltrate and capture some territories in this large forest between Kremina and Dibrova. So that's why I'm showing here that Ukrainian troops are controlling significant portion of this forest at this point. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on at North Lugansk. North Donbass front line. Things here also haven't changed much. This Wagner mercenaries continues their attacks. No major advances. Things remain more or less the same. There is official recognition on the Ukrainian side that the losses here in this, call it Bakhmut area on North Donbass, are very high. So essentially, Ukrainian side is flagging this front line with the bodies of Ukrainian soldiers again, which Ukraine cannot afford. Then, as you can see, there was some kind of weak attempt by Ukrainian side to counterattack near Kurdyumivka. Didn't work out. Which sort of, as I said before, it's not going to work out because Wagner mercenaries are not your regular Russian troops. They use sort of more common sense plus sort of communist or Stalin type discipline where you're going to get shot if you retreat. So, the attacks need to be completely different than Ukraine, like true attacks. And Ukrainian troops and command, most importantly, are not capable of doing this sort of normal attacks so far. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. Things here are also the same, as you can see. Looks like Russian troops, Russian command is moving, it's shifting its focus to Avdiivka area, trying to sort of figure out how, where to find sort of weak point in Ukrainian defenses here. As kind of like reminder, before they were trying to find this sort of weakness here, sort of south of Donetsk, in Mariinka, Mikhailivka, Vuhledar, didn't work out. Now they're trying to sort of find it north of Donetsk, continuing their attacks out of the Pisky salient. The problem for sort of Russian troops here, A, there is no Wagner mercenaries. B, it's all of this defensive positions here are pretty well sort of fortified, very very well engineered. So it takes a significant sort of number of troops, or it takes a lot of losses to punch through defensive lines. And then even this Pisky salient is becoming more like a narrow corridor that you cannot really use because it's narrow. So you have you're outflanked, and you can there's danger that you can get cut off. I'm not saying this is real danger, but you need to sort of be concerned about that. And for that reason, Russian side cannot really do major sort of penetration and exploitation from this point at this time. Now let's quickly check Zaporizhya front line. Things here remain the same, no essential changes. There are always sort of, reports by Russian side that Ukrainian side is preparing. Then Russian side, Ukrainian side, the Russian side is preparing. But so far, nothing is changing here at all. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. And Happy New Year, first of all. And planning to do update for tomorrow. Thanks again. Bye-bye.